If they're a high user of LinkedIn, they're likely going to be absorbing a lot more video, a lot more of the like your carousels and whatnot. So, try to lean into that. Whereas like if you're not seeing a lot of that, they're more likely going to be using email. So try that. I think that not one thing is going to work with all buyers either. Professional services, the people that I work with, they own the business. The relationship partners, they manage all the billing, they manage all the risk, they teach their teams, but they're also the experts. They're the ones that are providing, compliance, regulatory services to support every sort of style and makeup of business. So their time is precious, right? Simple as that. Their time is precious.
Welcome to the How to Sell podcast. I'm your host, Luigi Prestinenzi, and I am welcomed by my fellow co-host,
Dave Fastuca. Pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. And what's going to make this episode even better is we have a very special guest, Regan from Grant Thornton. So welcome to the How to Sell podcast.
G'day, gents. How are we?
Oh, we're better now because you know what? I love these podcasts, but Regan, I must say, having you on the screen is better than having Dave on the screen. That's for sure.
I'm not going to disagree with that.
just wait. You may be changing your mind soon.
Yeah. Well, hey, I know that our listeners are probably hearing this going, you already brought this up, but big game for Australia Matildas, the women's soccer national team or football national team this weekend. So we're very excited about that. Go Matildas. Yes. When you listen to this, you already know the answer to if they won or lost. But at this point, we're still excited. So we're still anticipating a great game. However, this is not a football podcast, even though we always start the episode, Dave, talking about football.
Yes.
It can be. I'm happy to talk about football.
Yeah, actually, yes, because tell us, you which team do you follow in the UK?
Look, I've got a soft spot for Man U, and shout out to my niece who actually plays for them in the academy. So I've got a bit of a soft spot for them.
Yeah,
that is cool.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Soft spot for Man U. She hates Harry Maguire, but he's going to West Ham United. We won't talk about that right now. But however, so Regan, thank you for coming on the podcast. Hey, before we jump into today's session, which is a really exciting session, we're going to talk a bit about, from your perspective, you're head of enablement. You've got people reaching out to you. So we're going to talk a bit about what triggers you to take a meeting, how do you go about purchasing, etc. All the fun stuff that we talk about all the time, Regan. But tell us a bit about you and what you do in your role at Grant Thornton.
Yeah, absolutely. So Regan, head of sales enablement at GT. A lot of my role kind of sits in two buckets. There is the sales enablement side, so really helping facilitate our partners and our senior leaders go to market with the right strategies, right approach. And then separate to that, I've actually built out my own and continuing to build out a separate sales function as well, which is really exciting. It means that I can learn from the sales that we do day to day. And really channel that back through to our coaching and vice versa. It also gives us a safe space to test different approaches, see what works, see what doesn't. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, and so even though you're head of sales and enablement, are you a lover of sales more than enablement? Like, I know this is a spicy question.
Look, you know what? It really depends on the outcome. I think that if it's a good day of winning great opportunities with fantastic clients, it could be that. But if I can get an aha moment from part of my coaching session, it's just as big a win, to be honest.
Yeah, awesome. Hey, so I can't wait. I'm actually, like I said, really, really pumped to jump into this because obviously we talk all the time about this topic, right? About cold emailing and outreach and all that sort of stuff. But let's start I want to start at top of funnel. So you're obviously on the receiving end of a lot of salespeople trying to get your attention. Tell us, what would trigger you to take a meeting versus just hitting delete, receiving that call saying, I'm too busy, I'm about to step into a meeting, or not the right time for me. We'd love to get your feedback.
pretty juicy question there, Luigi. I think that there's a few things to it. First of all, if I'm looking at sequences, I will wait until you run through your sequence to see what you actually do. So I don't know if that's pretty cruel. Sorry to the sellers out there. But I do test as well. Like, are they using multi-channel?
Yeah.
What sort of messages do they come with? And I think the biggest thing for me is don't sell straight off the bat. You don't know me. You don't know my priorities. Like, share insights. I can't tell you how valuable insights are to me, particularly wearing both hats.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that I'm constantly learning. If you've got something that, an idea, a product that creates amazing value and benefits, I want to hear about the values parts first. So I would say definitely strive to go insight first, value first, more than anything in terms of outreach for me. Personalization. Take 5 minutes to get to know me. Like, I'm pretty candid. I'm pretty transparent. You can see a lot of the stuff on my LinkedIn. So really, if you take 5 minutes on that, then I'll likely see it in how you've approached me as well, and we'll likely take a meeting. I don't say no too often. It's just more you can see what's automated and what's not.
Yeah. So in
Nice.
the occasion that you do say no, what drives you to say no?
Yeah, lack of personalization. So
Yeah.
getting my name wrong, that's a pretty simple one. And then also if I say, at the moment I'm very busy. I've got a few deadlines. Reach out in a month or two. If you reach out and you've made an effort, that would change. But if you don't take me out of your sequence after I've said, hey, I'm really busy at the moment, come back to me in a month or two, and I'm still getting your emails, then I'm just going to potentially block you.
Yeah.
Which makes me sound like an awful person, I know.
Well, time is precious, right? So,
Yeah.
what's important to you, Regan, in your role, and what insights are you looking for?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that for me, it's all about that flow from what I can learn, what I can take from those learnings and repurpose as well, both in the hat of a sales leader and then the hat of a sales enablement leader as well. So for me, I'm interested to know what's working and what's not.
Mhm.
But I think ultimately it comes down to um, not what you're selling. It is really the learnings that you can kind of provide and the value that you can kind of bring. I'm probably already repeating myself, but
No, that's all right.
yeah, I think that with this, I don't really care about the tech, if that makes sense. It's more about that value piece.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Interested on that. I was going to add a follow on to that. There is like everyone's always asking for time. Here's
Yes.
some insights. Can I grab 15 minutes of your time? Right. I'll find a time on my calendar and so forth. Do you prefer if it's something that interests you, but you're jammed with time, will you still opt in to book into a calendar, or would you prefer if the insights, if you respond back and say, yeah, this is great, if the insights were delivered to you in a video or summary where you could then
Yeah.
consume in your own time? What's your preference?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think that video always helps. Recordings always help because, particularly like you said, that time limitation. We're all busy. If I find it really valuable, I will make time for you, the individual. I think that I'm a lifelong learner. I will want to make sure that I learn as much as possible. So I think that if you've got that value, if you're able to send that through, I can consume. If I've got questions, and then there's an open channel of communication, I definitely take that up for sure. But I'll also make time for those who are, in Australia, we get a lot of individuals selling from the US, particularly. So early morning, late night. I'm okay to take those as long as I know that there's something in it for me. You can really isolate the sellers that are in it to only make revenue, or those that really want to make a long-term impact on businesses.
Yeah,
Yeah,
great.
this is really good insight, and I'd love just before we jump into the whole really trying to understand some of the key metrics and what drives you from an enablement perspective. You did mention video, so I do want to
Yeah.
talk about that. If you were to, I know you probably don't know the exact percentage, right? But if you look at your email, out of all the email outreach that you receive,
Mm.
what percentage would be video, would have video added into it?
Minimal, like
Okay.
0.2%,
Really?
I would
Is
say. Yeah,
that
very,
yeah.
very minimal. I think I've only received it from about two sellers, and one of which we're an existing client of. The other
Wow.
one was just before a meeting, and I actually sent it on to our CMO and been like, "This is impressive. This
Yeah.
gives that real personal element. You see them raw. They might even, mumble through a little bit of it, but it
Yeah.
really brings that human element back. And to me, the human element, even when I guess you're restricted on time, is I think a real priority for me.
That's really interesting. So you've got
Yeah.
not a lot of people are using video as to leverage. Yeah. Because it
And
doesn't have to be perfect, right?
Yeah, no, it doesn't. I don't want you to sit there for like an hour trying to get the right video. I'd prefer you to stumble over something and then get to the point. And one of the things, Luigi, I would say is that it doesn't have to be their content. Like if they've seen a really interesting podcast, and look, you're great at this. You will always send things through to me that you think's relevant to me. I
Mm,
will consume that. Particularly out on a run. If I'm
mm.
driving into work, like those times, I can still be absorbing the information that's being provided.
Pardon the interruption, but I have to let you know about this free resource. The Grow Forum newsletter has over 10,000 subscribers that are learning how to sell. Each and every week, we send you tips, strategies, and also some tools and tech on how to achieve the most out of your sales pipeline. If you're ready to level up, sign up for free at growforum.io/newsletter and get the first issue this week. It's one of those things where do you send a video in the first email or do you wait till a response and send it back? I guess like personally, I like if someone sends me a video or something to review, I'll look at that, gauge whether I'm going to get some value, then
Mm.
respond. Rather than trying to pick a time in someone's calendar. It's just too much.
It
Yeah.
is, yeah, for sure. I agree that in those first few reach outs, and or mix it up.
Yeah.
If your email's not working, then send a video or vice versa.
Yeah.
I think that one thing is not to be set in stone with your buyers. Like
Mm,
really try to understand them. If they're a high user of LinkedIn, they're likely going to be absorbing a lot more video, a lot more
mm,
of the like your carousels and whatnot. So try to lean into that. Whereas like if you're not seeing a lot of that, they're more likely going to be using email. So try that. I think that
yeah.
not one thing is going to work with all buyers either.
Yeah. Now, this is the I want to get into the meaty stuff. This is good, right? Because we've spoken about top of funnel. We've spoken about, what would trigger you to take a meeting,
Mm,
what gets, put through to the junk inbox, etc. Now, I just want to, because obviously messaging is pretty vital, right?
yeah.
You mentioned that you're looking for insights, you're looking for education, but in order for somebody to deliver that insight and education, they need to have a bit of an understanding of what some of your challenges might be in your role. Would love to dive into that from an enablement perspective. What are the biggest challenges that you find and you're trying to overcome in your role?
Yeah, okay. So for me, and look, this might just be for where I work, professional services, right? So, for the purposes, I guess, in context of this, professional services, the people that I work with, they own the business. They are the relationship partners. They manage all the billing. They,
Yeah.
manage all the risk. They teach their teams, but they're also the experts. They're the ones that are providing, compliance, regulatory services to support
Mm.
every sort of style and makeup of business. So their time is precious, right? Simple as that.
Mm.
Their time is precious. So anything that I do in the enablement space for them, I kind of almost has to uh, have two real contributing factors. First one, will it save them time?
Mm.
Simple as that. Will this helps save them time in their day. I'm not trying to add more to their plate. In fact, I'm actually trying to take stuff away from it to make their lives easier so they can be the best that they can be, and also help support our clients as best as possible. So it would be how do I save them time, and how do we ensure that they can be confident in what we're delivering as value, so then they can use it, because really they have to be confident in what we're giving them, to then go off and trial it in their own day to day as well. So I think they're probably the two key things for me before going any further, to be honest.
Yeah. So really, you've got very limited to all the partners that you're working with have very limited time. So it's all about how you can help them save time, right?
Yeah, ultimately, yeah. And with that, I mean, B2B, if you're a sales rep in B2B, that's your job.
Yeah.
So being sales, traditionally, it means that you are the partner, still being the expert as well as the salesperson. So if you've got, if you have a complete book already and you've got a great group of clients, well then, your capacity to sell and prospect and nurture, new clients is limited. So we want to make sure that we can help them balance that as well. Whereas I think a traditional sales rep, your role is to purely sell.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's
And one
definitely some
thing,
differences, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
so as within your role, Regan, like what's success look like? Like what are you measured on within the business?
Well, look, I love nothing more than a good measurement and metrics, to be honest. And I think that for me, I've made them up. Like I've I've gone to our chief marketing officer. I've spoken with our executive team, and I said I think that I should be measured off of win rate, growth, average deal close, or days to close, how quickly we're managing our inbound sales, how many touches. There's a lot there, I think, as well, between what is the marketing metrics and what is the sales metrics. So I almost play in a bit of both, to be honest. But hey, I love to achieve. It's one of my biggest joys in life. So the more, well, not the more metrics, but I think the greater focus on them for me to achieve, the better.
Nice.
Yeah.
And look, part of this podcast is to talk about how the people that we're speaking to buy
Yeah.
and that process. So, can you take us through what does the process look like if someone's trying to sell into Grant Thornton, in particular into your role? What does that process look like? And who makes the decision? Are you a decision maker? Do you need to take it to someone else?
Yeah.
Um, Take us through that journey.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So it would really depend on how many people it would impact,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I would say for services, for example, if it's a part of an extension of our sales program and sales coaching, that would ultimately sit with myself,
Yeah.
and influencers being, my fellow leadership team, and then obviously who I report to. So our CMO, Fraser McNaughton. With that, as a collective, while I would be the ultimate decision maker, it would very much involve a team and collaborative approach. I want to make sure that they're all on board as well, so their teams are on board. For something bigger than that, so say, well, not bigger, but say for something that requires technology integration, and put into our tech stack, that in itself, that's a much larger buying party. I want to make sure that I get my CTO and his team really on board, and they're fantastic, right? They'll look at this from a completely different angle to me, and then we also want to make sure, what does this look like from a risk and business perspective, and then obviously from a finance perspective, does this bring the value and greater impact for, say, the rest of the business? So those technology pieces, I think, definitely would have a larger buying party, and they'll come in at different stages of the buying process as well.
Yeah, and if it's, I love this, and if we can just maybe touch on it, we won't name names. So just like that famous Seinfeld episode, we're a Seinfeld fan. We won't name names, but you are looking at two vendors for
I am, yes.
a project.
Mm.
Obviously, you started with one, you're now migrating to the other. Could you maybe, because we had a chat about this the other day, could you maybe
Yeah.
just talk us through how one vendor is probably not in your in your top, not at the top of the list now, just
Yeah.
because of the way in which they've approached you and what they did, or what they could have done differently, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, sorry to this vendor, in advance, I would say. It's never nice to make these decisions, but again, it goes back to that criteria around how much value I can bring to the business.
Yeah,
Um, so with that, the initial one, while yes, it was a great solution, it still is, and would suit many businesses. What I found during that decision processes, I was almost ready to go with them, but then looking a bit further, another vendor came into the mix, and it was almost like the second vendor ended up providing all of these great insights and being like, you know what, you can also use this as a part of three different areas of your business. Like
mm,
you can use this benefit. Here's some free insights. This is how other professional services firms may use this. Let's loop in your head of digital marketing to get across this, because it might help from that top of funnel point of view as well. So to me, I was like, great. Well, if it can benefit not just my team, my
yeah,
greater team, that is an instant win, right? But then in the background, the initial vendor is chasing me on closing the deal, and only like
mm,
closing the deal. When can you get that contract signed? When can you get that contract signed? And to me, that left a bit of a bad taste in my mouth, because I did say it would be a long time. Like,
yeah,
obviously, we wanted to go through the right channels and prioritizing those channels. And, you know, opposed to that was this other firm or other vendor providing insights again. So
yeah.
ultimately, I was going with the first one, but then I was like, "Oh, this is too good." Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
So what?
like, from that, I think the learning from my end would be, don't just try close the deal. Like,
Yeah.
it's not about just, getting a sign. It actually, it just makes me feel like a number, rather
Okay.
than how you're helping my
Mm.
business.
Yeah, but you know what I found really interesting about this, and there's so many, like, we could build a really cool workshop around this actually. But what's so interesting is you just said it right. You have tech solution impacts so many
Mm,
different people. So therefore, from a sales perspective, if they're not understanding how their solution impacts the business and the different people, and
yeah,
then if they're not catering for that in their sales process, of course, they've got time pressure because somebody's on their end going, when are you closing the deal? So all they're
yes,
focused on is closing the deal. But if they had to manage this properly, to think, you actually, there are all these micro steps, there's these people that need to get involved. Actually, this is going to take a bit longer because of A, B, and C. And if they'd asked a past based question to say, hey, when you added X into Salesforce, what did the process look like? How long did it take to get it across, and who was involved? It'll
mm.
probably give them a better understanding of what they need to do to then get their solution across the line with you.
Oh, 100%, and I think you just absolutely nailed it there. It's, one of the things that I love about being on the sales side, but also the buying side,
Yeah.
is evaluating around those sort of questions, those past questions, making sure
Mm,
that they really understand that background and decision-making process, and then also those future questions around, well, what
mm.
will this achieve?
Yeah.
The second vendor was able to connect those dots a lot quicker. They have been able to bring in those additional experts that they're like, oh, I heard that around the digital
Yeah.
marketing side. Let me connect you to this person. In fact, let me give you that demo. You can just have it run for it. We'll give you some free data and insight. So that to me was really, really good. I was very impressed. I would say though, there was one part in there that I was a bit on the fence about. They bagged out their competitor. And
Ah,
that to
really?
me, yeah. And I think Luigi and I have spoken about this in the past. It's probably the worst thing that I personally think you can do. You know, be confident in your ability and what you bring to the table, because that bad mouthing is just, it's not nice.
Do you have a great product, but are struggling to reach more customers? Are you spending hours on sales activities that aren't generating results, leaving you feeling frustrated and discouraged? The Sales OS program is a step-by-step operating system that will help you slash your selling hours in half while rapidly growing your revenue. In under just 2 weeks, you can be well on your way to creating predictable revenue. In Sales OS, we'll show you how to build predictable sales pipeline, build lasting relationships with your customers, and sell more in less time. The art of negotiation and motivating and leading a successful sales team. If this sounds like something that you need in your business, visit growforum.io/sales and apply to see if you have the right mindset to achieve predictable revenue. The Sales OS program is your ticket to predictable revenue. Don't wait any longer, apply today. Do you think that that process of bringing in other parties within the business, personally, I would see that maybe as a risk from myself, because now I'm expanding the project sort of scope and the people I need to get on board to get a yes, but in your case, like, it worked out to be a positive. I just worry about, like, I just want to sell to Regan, get her to sign the deal, but that turned you off, and now you're going with the other vendor, right? So I've just there's always that double-edged sword with that, wouldn't you feel?
No, I
No.
don't think decisions are made in silos at all. I think that no matter what, all big decisions, all important decisions that impact our
Yeah.
business will have way more than one buyer. And we see this with, our clients as well,
Yeah.
is that there's more than one. There's generally more than 3 or 5. It can get up to 9, 10 or more. So I think, being able to have that collaborative discussion up front is a very powerful thing. It will show you, it's not just Regan who has a driver around performance, efficiency, and revenue. It also has criteria in there that we need to balance out, from minimizing risk, a smooth integration process, around 100% support and 100% uptime. All of these things will matter as a part of the decision-making process. Just because it might not be an immediate priority to me doesn't mean that it's not an immediate priority to, like, the overall business.
Well, then, based on that, right? So I'm talking to you now. I've got it may deal with the marketing team, so I've got the marketing team involved, digital, maybe another area of the business, and now I start to multi-thread and
Mm,
communicate with you and the others in that conversation. Now, if I've gone direct to the CMO as well and gone around, do you feel like that's gone around you? Like, how do you feel about that
no.
whole multi-threading process?
No, I think it's important. Like, one of the things that seller could do really well is arm me to help influence. If I think it's an absolute necessity to move something forwards, then, give me the tools to also be able to influence their decision. But also, understand the other drivers. I would much prefer for that multi-thread to happen, because by the time we get to the table to discuss this, there is, I guess, a limitation around, or there's a full understanding. Everyone's being able to understand the value that it might bring, and from their different views, to be honest. So yeah, I would say go for it.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah. This is good insight, right? This is really good insight
Mm.
around, because I think that's a lot of people fear multi-threading because they think, oh, I could piss my buyer, my champion off. But I think you're right. Like, it all depends on the mindset that you're taking when multi-threading. If I'm multi-threading,
Yeah,
I'm trying to go over you, or I'm trying to bypass you, then yes, you should fear it. But if I'm multi-threading to think, well, actually, I really want to start to educate and provide insights and just give, and I'm not asking for
mm,
anything in return, then that's a completely different mindset. And you know
Mm.
what? We shouldn't be fearing that, because you're giving stuff.
I guess
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
so the reason why I mentioned that was like in my previous role, I did that, right? So like I was selling to procurement, and then I thought, it'd be great for me to have a relationship with the CFO. So I went to the
Mm,
CFO and said, "Hey, I'm speaking with procurement." And procurement took that as going over their head and got real protective over the role, right? Which then
Yeah.
put the deal at risk. But in essence, I was just trying to help build a better foundation for this to get approved. Maybe it was the way I approached it.
Mm.
Maybe better communication with the head of procurement. But because then on the flip side, it's like, hey, how are you okay if I reach out to the CFO? And then they say no, you just deal with me. And then it's one to one. So it's like, how do you
Yeah.
deal with that?
yeah, look, and I think that, say, with procurement's a different beast in itself, right? There's a lot
Yeah.
of policies and processes there as well. I would say that, if if it was me, if it was my CMO, very much bringing that conversation full circle. So yeah, name dropping and stuff like that. Hey, I've just reached out to Phrase. Just to have that heads up. I think that
Mm.
that's always appreciated.
Mhm.
Where I say from where procurement's involved, I would always go CFO first, procurement second.
There we go. We heard it here first.
Yeah, that's right.
Mate, we'll challenge that when we have procurement leaders on our podcast in the next month or
Yeah, well, absolutely. I would love that.
so. Yeah. Well, this is great. Hey, I just want to ask, just before we come to a point of letting our listeners know and our audience know where they can engage with you. If you were to look back, right? And actually, I haven't prepared you for this, Regan, so I'm just asking this, but I know that because you were not just in the enablement role, you're also in the sales role, and you've done it for a number of years. What was the one deal that you were able to get across the line that when you look back, you're like, you know what? That was a milestone learning. Like I
Yeah.
really took a learning from it, and it's really shaped the seller I am today.
Oh, you know what? It was one of the earlier ones when we were piloting the inbound sales piece here at
Yeah.
GC. And it was really that first call that I made where the owner of a business was essentially not picking up the phone to the partner. And I was fortunate enough to get him on the phone, and straight away, objection, 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 and slowing it down, really going through, really listening to his concerns, and then taking things from his side. And there was just a moment where I was like, I can either, if I react too quick, I've lost
Yeah.
this. But if I slow it down, if I listen to his concerns, if I'm able to get him to agree to go through that scope and really understand his priorities again, we'll be able to get this across the line. And it was the first. It was one of those first wins, but it was also one of those first times where we just really took charge of the process, and we've just seen value and delivery ever since. For me, I think it's be confident in what I know as a sales coach, apply it as a salesperson, but more importantly, like listen to the buyer. Simple as that. Just listen.
Yeah,
Great
that's
takeaway.
good. That's good, right? And I can only imagine the difficult, or maybe not difficult, but the challenge in holding back, right? As
Mm.
Mm.
those objections are coming up, you probably were like, yeah, I can handle this.
I'm a bullet out of a gate most days, Luigi. You know this, mate. So that was probably the biggest takeaway for me. And even discussing it now, I'm getting excited again. Like I'm really pumped because I love hearing about those stories. I
Yeah.
love bringing those up again. It's a great feeling, but lots to learn from it. Hey, I think you can learn as much from those wins as you can from losses. Probably more from losses, to be
Yeah.
honest. But a good win like that is good feeling.
Well, this has been awesome. I just want to say thank you. And I didn't put it out there, but full disclosure for our audience, I've been working with Regan for some time, and the team at Grant Thornton absolutely love it. And I've learned a tremendous amount from working with Regan and the team. So I just want to say thank you for the contribution you make from an enablement sales perspective. You're going to be putting more content out there over the next 12 months. So look out,
Absolutely.
world. Regan is coming. That's I'm your accountability buddy here. But where is the best place for our audience to engage with you and find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So look me up on LinkedIn, Regan Barker. Hopefully, I'm the only one. Not sure if I am, but yeah, no, happy to connect, happy to continue conversations with people as well. And Luigi, it's been an absolute pleasure to work with you over the last few years, and I think we've achieved great things together.
Yeah, and we're just scratching the surface, right? We're just scratching the
Absolutely,
surface.
mate.
So,
That's right.
and if you are a salesperson who's listening to this, you've read the little playbook on how to sell to enablement. Do yourself a favor. Make sure you research Regan before you reach out to her, because she won't accept a meeting. You'll be or actually, you know what? She'll let your sequence go to email 5, where it's saying, "Are you the right person to speak with, or should I be speaking to someone else?" Yes, that is gone. You're dead. So I just want to say, Regan, thanks so much. Now, as listeners to the How to Sell podcast, this is not over. Make sure you stay on, because we've now got the next segment, which is where we're going to talk through how to sell to someone in an enablement role. So we'll see you in a moment. Dave, what a cracking episode and
That was
chat
awesome.
with Regan.
Yeah, it was very, very good. Great
Mm.
insights. Was my first interview of someone in that sort of role. So to
Yeah.
hear their mindset was good. Like, she confronted a few of the things I mentioned,
Yeah.
disagreed, which is great. Yeah, that's not all about, if everyone knows everything, then what's the point of listening to the show?
Yeah. It's funny. I think, my biggest takeaway from that was I loved it where we spoke about, what's important to her in her role.
Mm.
She immediately went to the challenge that she's having with her partners is that they're time poor, and it's all about finding ways to help them save time, right? And for me, I think often when we're selling a product or service, we might be selling to, say, a role enablement, but we're not thinking potentially about what are they trying to, who are they trying to sell to? Yeah.
Mhm.
What's the key deliverable they're trying to achieve? So this is what I loved about that chat with Regan, and that's she brought that out early. Like, her role is to make this easier for X. So from for me, that whole sales process, that whole message has to be about how I can help her achieve that outcome.
But do you find where you're selling time saving, right,
Mm.
potentially as one of or a core benefit of the product or service you're selling, that's harder to attribute a cost to get over the line? Like, I've always found where, previously you're selling that this is going to take half the amount of time to do it.
Yeah.
So whatever your team salaries are, we're going to save you X dollars, that people gloss over that.
But I think yes, but I think there's a few things in what she said, right? So if we think about time, yeah. So she said, look, it's about helping them save. Like, the key thing, they've got time pressure. So I think, yeah, if you're reaching out to someone, say, hey, I can help you save time, or your team to save time, it's quite a blanket type of message. But I think if you're leading with, hey, can appreciate in your role the challenge that you have from an enablement perspective is getting time with your team, right?
Yeah.
Or your team are time poor because of ABC. And this, again, she said, lead with insight. I've got some insight on what others in the professional services space are doing to achieve X outcome, and also, minimize the amount of time people are investing in X. See how now we're thinking with empathy.
Yeah.
And then we're not just saying it's about saving time, it's about saying this is a problem, like assuming this is a problem is what we're hearing. And what was also interesting, that she is in the moment buying from 2 competing vendors, right? I love that, because she's saying one's just trying to close the deal. The other is saying, hey, there's a wider audience here that we need to nurture and educate. They're nurturing and educating, and they're now ahead. And you know what's really interesting, and I forgot to bring this up, right? Which I'm kicking myself, but because I've got a bit of insight on what's happening with those deals, one is double the price of the other.
The one
And
that's, can you say, we're not naming names.
no, the one that is trying to close is the cheaper product. The one
Right.
that's nurturing and educating is a more
She was
expensive
happy
one.
with that one until this other
Yeah.
vendor came out of nowhere. Did she sort out this other vendor, or did they just come in cold? Or
No, so what happened was they, as part of their process, they had to talk to someone else, right? They had to just do a quick
okay,
evaluation. But what the
yeah,
other party did through that process is they started to go wider. They actually multi-threaded through education, right? And
mm,
they encouraged her and got her thinking about things that she wasn't thinking about. So she was saying, she mentioned this, right? That digital could achieve X if you do B, right?
mm.
So they allowed her to think outside the square and think about things that she wasn't thinking about because they were looking to go, well, we need other people. We want to educate other people. The other provider was just going, well, how do we get the deal done? Very
Well,
different
they thought
mindset.
they had it in the bag. It sounds like they thought
Absolutely,
they
they
had it
thought
in
they
the
had it in the
bag,
bag.
but
Her
maybe they.
buying, I was on the call. Um, her buying indicators were high. She's like, "This is awesome!" Like you can see, she's a very extrovert, you
Yeah,
know, really emotive individual. And she actually said that this is awesome. Regan was saying, "This is great. I love this.
mm,
Fantastic." But just because there's emotional enthusiasm, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're ready to buy. Yeah,
yeah,
and again, if we look back on the whole premise, how would I sell to that role? In
yes,
understanding the current, past, current, future questions, which I'm big on, right? This is not the first piece of tech they've bought.
mm,
They've went through a whole process of transformation when it comes to technology over the last few years. So, and they've done a lot of additions into their Salesforce environment. So, a simple question of, would love to know, describe the last integration that you completed with Salesforce. What did the process look like?
mm.
Who was involved? Right? Just those three would tell you that. And she said it. If we got tech coming in, we have to get the CTO on board. We've got
Mhm.
to get risk. We've got to get finance. Right? There's multiple people that have to, as part of the process, just because they're also in a professional services space as well. Yeah. So there's data privacy and all that sort of stuff, cybersecurity. There's a
Yeah, yeah,
heightened focus on it. And this is where I often challenge salespeople. They're saying, oh, because of tough times, deals are getting delayed, blah, blah, blah. Well, actually, maybe the deal's not getting delayed. Maybe your questioning of the process is not there. So you're not understanding the full process they're going through and what are some of the key people that need to get involved. So again, if I was selling into that exact solution, and I can't talk about the exact solution, right? But if I was selling that exact solution, yes, once that excitement's there, I would have said, hey, I would have asked those questions, based on some previous stuff that you've brought in, what did it look like? Who was involved? What were some of the challenges that you found when you were trying to implement, when trying to get that across the line, right? Do you foresee that those challenges you'll encounter those same challenges when trying to get this across the line?
mhm,
Because she might have said, Regan might have said, well, actually, we didn't consult with risk because that's happened before. We didn't consult with risk. And when we were at that point of decision, actually, we had to go and do ABC. We needed to provide a risk assessment, whatever. Okay, great. Would it make sense for us as part of our action plan to put that on the list just to check if that's something that's required? Absolutely.
yeah,
So this is again when the mutual action plan, the way that I would have managed that deal, which it wasn't done, I would have put together that mutual action plan with her, right? I would have sat with her and said, "Hey, let's actually look at all the dependencies that are connecting into what we need to get done, right? And put up an action plan. What are the key milestones that we need to complete? Who do we need to get on board? Who do we need to understand their needs, scope, challenges, barriers, all that sort of stuff, and have it in an action plan. And let's work through that action plan. And the very last thing is the contract.
mm.
But we can't even talk about that until we get A, B, C, D, E ticked off,
It just
right?
shows you how important the discovery process and the
Absolutely.
questions you ask
Yeah.
are. Look, too often we see it that people just go, gloss over that or race through that to get to the
Mm.
contract out where, that's probably your biggest risk by
Yeah.
speeding through that process.
But and that's why we think about it, like that contract, it'll come. But if we're rushing to contract and we're avoiding all those other steps, we're not actually enabling the buyer to buy. And in
Mm,
Regan's case, as enthusiastic as she is and was about it, there were other people, there were other stakeholders that have to be involved. And one selling organization did not understand. They didn't actually identify who. They didn't put the action plan in place. They didn't partner with her to tick those boxes together.
Yeah.
They were fundamentally trying to sell to her. The other organization was educating, nurturing, bringing more people. So how would I sell? Just like sort of summarized, really getting a clear definition of what the internal process looks like, and then developing an action plan with her so that we can work through those steps together. And I could also say, hey, if I've worked with a company like, Grant Thornton and Regan, and I know, what this is how historically companies like this buy. So I know their process, but I also know that actually I've encountered another stakeholder
mhm.
in the step. And when I spoke to Regan, she might not have added that. I would say to her, hey, Regan, what I've seen with other companies at this stage is they usually need to get legal in early just to make sure we can tick off ABC. We haven't put that on the action plan. Doesn't make sense for us to put them on the action plan. You know what? Never thought. I'm glad you brought that up. Let's put them on. Great.
Yeah.
So we are
Help her.
enabling. Yeah, yeah. And also maybe asking the question and, the business case, right? What does a business case need to look like when we go for that final presentation? What do you need to have in it, right? Have you thought about it? Maybe she hasn't thought about it. Great. Let's add that to the action plan. Yeah. By thinking about all these things, we can actually create the right strategy to partner with her, because
Yeah.
the last thing that Regan wants is to go to that final point of decision and do all that work. And then they say, well, actually, you haven't thought about ABC. We're not going to give you the funds. Right. But if we can help her see what are those gaps and we can enable her to be successful in that process, she's going to feel better about it. We're seen as a trusted advisor partner. And you know what? We've got a long-term relationship coming up. So again, the advice that I would give, that's exactly how I would sell, is not focus on the contract, really focus on the steps, the stakeholders, the action plan, and then partner with Regan and the head of, the enablement team to walk through, guide them through, educate, nurture to that point of decision.
Well, that was perfect, mate. And look, to wrap this up in a nice little bow, to get more of these episodes and to be notified when this mini playbook will be ready, make sure to sign up to our newsletter at growforum.io/newsletter to keep in contact with Louis and I and all the great stuff that we've got coming out from Grow Forum.
Yeah, and stay. That's exactly right. And make sure you engage with us, because we have some incredible enablement leaders that are coming on to share, very similar to what Regan's story was, to share with us exactly how they buy, why they take meetings, why they don't, key performance indicators, challenges, so that you can, when you get this playbook, you know what, a big bulk of the work's done. You'll have the persona, you have your messaging framework, you'll have some great questions. It'll help you be, help you be the best sales professional you can be and make it easier for you to engage with this particular role. So if you want any assistance around all this stuff, like I said, Dave said, hit us up. Also come and check us out on LinkedIn. And we look forward to sharing some of these concepts with you.